Good afternoon, Dean Holland, Music and Meadows colleagues, students, friends of David's from the piano community and elsewhere, people joining us on the live stream, and, most importantly, David's beautiful wife, Brittany. I'm Tom Keck, Director of the Music Division, and I had the great pleasure of working closely with David the past 3 years. David was a private person and did not desire an occasion such as this, but since his passing, we've all been hit quite hard by the loss, and numerous people reached out and wanted to grieve together while celebrating David's life. It is through this substantial outpouring, including direct communications and messages on social media from friends who wanted to share their love and respect of David with Brittany and have a chance to reminisce together, that we gather today. Thank you all for honoring David in this way. We've assembled a program including spoken remembrances, musical performances, and a video compilation that will honor David's life and contributions. So please let us proceed with Cliff Gould, a member of the Meadows operations team and close friend of David's, for some words and an instrumental composition that he had written for David.
Hi, everyone. I think it feels like David's here. We got, sort of a mind that's just a conglomerate of all the memories with him, and I could just feel them around us. I told Tom I wanted to say something, and he asked me if I would pray. So I've written a prayer. I've done a lot of prayers, a lot of funerals. For some reason, I'm the person that gets called to do this in the family. I did it for my cousin after 9/11 bombings in front of 5,000 firemen, and they picked me for some reason. But I think it's something we have to do. We have to get together and set this process forward and move on down the road. It helps us, Brittany, every time. It's hard, but you have to do it. They're also going to have me play this song. It's this thing I got. I shouldn't have posted this thing on Facebook. It was something I did for David about 3 years ago for his birthday. He likes Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I like him. I can't play like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I wrote this little song for him, and he graciously, he's a real musician, I'm not, just 4 chords and the truth. But, so I posted it, and some people in the music office saw it and said, well, Carol Harris said, Cliff, would you do this? And if you know Carol, I would rather say no to Sam than Carol. So I said, okay. Well, first I said, I don't know. And she goes, think about it. Oh, okay, I know what that means. So anyway, I texted Brittany, and she said to do it. So I'm going to try and get through that. I just wanted to say, I'm looking back here at these garages, and the first year I was here, I met David a couple months before. He asked me to come down and help him change what's called an action. And any of you technicians here, you know, of course, what that is, and a lot of pianists. And I didn't know what it was. So I said, sure, let's go change an action. And I came down here into that garage, and we both grew up at about the same time, seeing the same movies and TV shows. And there was a movie that came out with Chevy Chase called Fletch. And there's a character that he dresses up in all these ridiculous things. And one of the characters he did was G. Gordon Liddy, which was supposed to be a mechanic. He didn't know anything about mechanics. It's like me going in there. And so when I went in there and he said, okay, we're going to take the action and pull out the pins, and I go, oh, well, it's all ball bearings now. And he started laughing because he had seen that movie. And from that point forward, anytime he'd ask me to do anything, I'd say, well, it's all ball bearings now, David. And he would start laughing. In fact, the character at the end of the scene keeps making this ridiculous noise, like that, like he's got these fake teeth, and so all I'd have to do is just go, and David would start laughing. So anyway, that's just a story about David and us back there. So here we go. This is the prayer I wrote for us. I took all the Baptist out of it so nobody can get really excited or anything. It's so I'm doing two things. I'll have three more things for Sam, so I can have five. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so there is a quote that's been attributed to Mozart. Some say it was Claude Debussy, and still others say it was a great jazz musician, Thelonious Monk. It may be more apropos or profound to think it came from Mozart, because as we know, he made too many notes. But it goes like this: the music is not in the notes, but in the silence between them. So I want everyone here to be included in this prayer. I have much more to say that I'll pray silently, but I do hope what I say now draws your attention to the one whom I speak every night and every day in silence between the words. So gracious, loving Creator, we come together today with heavy hearts remembering David Brown, a man whose quiet dedication, skill, and love left an indelible mark on this community. He worked behind the scenes, but his work made beauty possible. He tuned, repaired, and rebuilt the instruments that gave life to the music we have cherished here at Meadows. Though he's no longer with us, his legacy resonates like a perfectly tuned note, steady and true. We all acknowledge the weight of grief in this room, the ache of loss that words cannot fully express. In fact, all the verbs, nouns, and adjectives we search for collapse under the weight of this grief. Yet, even in sorrow, we are reminded that the most profound music is not just in the notes, but in the silence between them. In this pause, in this moment of loss, help us to find meaning not in the grief, but in the gratitude for the gift of having known David. David understood more than almost anyone I've personally ever known that craftsmanship takes patience. His life and work here was a personal object lesson that care and attention shape something lasting, and that strength often lies in what is unseen. I pray we take the same spirit into our own lives, tending to the work before us with dedication, supporting one another in love, and recognizing that true artistry is not just about recognition or applause, but about giving something meaningful to the world. Like the giant redwoods of California that stand strong, and not because of a deep root system, because intertwining their roots, they hold each other up. Let's lean on each other in this time of mourning. Cause us to use the bonds of friendship and community to sustain us, as David's quiet presence did. His memory will be part of the foundational root system beneath us, unseen, but a beautiful memory holding us together as we move forward. And for his wife, Brittany, and for all who loved him most deeply, and for me, we ask for comfort. Help us grasp hold of the peace we already have in knowing that David's work, his craftsmanship, his humor, his generosity lives on in the music, in the instruments he restored, in the technicians he mentored and taught in this very hall, all over this building, and most of all in our hearts that he touched. As we carry forward, let's not rush past this moment of remembrance. Let's use it and honor David by doing our own work with care, by also finding joy in the quiet service, the silence between, and by recognizing that what we build in love and dedication will continue far beyond us, just as David's life resonates like one of his well-tuned pianos and echoes through this place and all of us. He's been released from our eyes and from our arms, but not from our hearts. His music plays on. Amen. So, this song, Tunerman's Paradise, that's David's Instagram, and I mean, he's got, his Instagram is really cool, the name and everything, Tunerman _ DB 88, the 88 keys and all that. And you can tell he's very technical and thinks about everything because of that, just that right there. My Instagram is Farafik Fark. So, you know, the difference in people is big, pretty stark there. So I'm going to try and play this thing.
had no idea Cliff could do that. I had no idea. I did have the privilege of playing with David once with Akira. We did a little jazz combo at noon one time, and it was just a blast, and David shows up with his bass, and he's like, well, I haven't played in a long time. But music is and was always in his bones. He loved music. And when I first came back to SMU, my office was a closet that was at the furthest end of John Lee's office now. But it was just a closet. And I had a keyboard in there, and it backed up to the piano workshop. So when David Brown arrived on the scene, I knew the new piano technician had arrived because I knew the former one, and quickly introduced myself. And I would be in my office, and David would be blasting music. I mean, full tilt blasting music. And it was really cool stuff. And so the genres that he explored musically were profound because the variety was so great. And David I never left a conversation with David that I didn't learn something about the music that he was listening to and that he was engaged in. And his knowledge was so vast that I found it to be something quite extraordinary and for me delightful, because I like all kinds of music. But David knew, I just can't even tell you all the different kinds of music that he knew and delighted in. He was a very, very dear friend to me from really the first time that we met. As Cliff mentioned, his love for his craft was profound. He cared for the pianos in this building and every piano he touched with the love of an artist. This was the instrument that he devoted his life to knowing, and he did it very well. In addition to just being a wonderful craftsman with the piano, he was a competent human. So he took the chaos of our stage management issues and turned them into order, which for him was a mixed blessing, because he did it, and he did it really well. But it took him away from the full-time duties of treating the pianos in the building. And that was always a point of friction for him. And he always wanted to go back to full-time piano technician, but he was too good at what he did. And it was a blessing to us in the music division to have the order that he brought to stage management. My notes are not very organized. And so I would say this, David, I always used to think of him as kind of an Eeyore. He was quiet. Sometimes you weren't sure what was going on in there. Brittany's nodding her head. But then he'd get this twinkle in his eye, and man, life would just erupt. And that smile would turn up on the corners of his mouth. And before you knew it, David was regaling me with some tale. He would text me messages that it just made me laugh. I mean, he had a sense of humor that was so extraordinary. And he could find life and humor in any situation. He went through a very dark period of time here, and when he went through a divorce. But the day came when all of a sudden life just erupted in David Brown again. And her name was Brittany. And all of a sudden David started showing up in these really cool shirts and, and I'm going, David, what is going on? What happened to the t-shirt? And he goes, well, Brittany, she dresses me and has to approve what I do in the morning. And you know what? His latter days were better than his former days because of you, his great love. And for those of us who knew David, we rejoiced in the life that he had with Brittany. He, for me, was a true friend through thick and thin. He suffered at the end. I'm glad he's not suffering anymore. I'm really glad he's not suffering. I rejoice in his life and I rejoice that I will see him again. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm really honored this afternoon to speak a few words about David, and I thank you, Tom, for putting this event together. This is something we really needed. Many of you know that David was my dear friend. We shared countless hours of conversations, like Melissa, and through the joyful times and the sad times. He supported me in everything, and he made all of the pianos at school and at my home a joy to play. I knew him very well. We were the same age, me always reaching that next age milestone 3 months ahead of David. David was exceptionally intelligent. He was well-read, clever, funny, sensitive, thoughtful, generous, and kind. He was a man of pride and a gentleman, and he liked things to be right. He brought excellence and unrelenting standards to his position as piano technician at Meadows. From the complexity of rebuilding Steinways and voicing piano hammers to something seemingly simple like dusting the piano and cleaning the keys before performances, David took pride in all that he did for us. David Brown was a caretaker. Besides caring for our pianos, he cared about each individual in Meadows, and he made it a point to develop a friendly relationship with as many faculty members and students as possible. One of our very last conversations had to do with his utmost concern that the piano students would get the rehearsal time they needed in the hall before the semester began. And despite the medical difficulties he was having last month, he came the first day of classes to meet our guest artist and make sure that all was set up properly for her. He tried valiantly to stay healthy and return to work, and he was courageous until the end. For me, David's presence will always be here, especially in this room. Every foot of this stage has his footprint on it. Every inch of that piano has his fingerprint. David was present for every one of my performances, and he sat out there for a portion of all of my rehearsals. And there was always great comfort in knowing that he cared. The day after an event, there was always a text. How did your students' recital go? How were the auditions? Did the juries go well? So yes, he loved the opportunity to care for all of us and for the instruments. But he also treasured the music and the music making. So David, on behalf of the piano faculty, thank you for helping to create beautiful music in this building for 15 years. We honor you and will never forget you. I'm holding this hanky in my hand. David gave this to me when I did a face plant on that ledge over there. And I just never managed to give it back to him, but somehow it feels good to be holding his hanky. If there's one less hanky in the house, Brittany, I've got it. All right, I'm privileged to play some music in honor of David.
There aren't adequate words I'm able to use to properly articulate just who David Brown was. To some, he was a friendly hand propping a door open with a large screwdriver so we wouldn't have to call facilities when we arrived on campus. To others, he was a helpful word of advice about instrument care, or perhaps a slap on the wrist if he spotted a tightly sealed drink on top of a piano. No drinks, not ever. But Dave wasn't just friendly and witty. David would freely give hours of his time to impart valuable skills that ultimately would feed families and children for decades to come. I didn't talk to Dave much about faith, but I can tell you that he loved his neighbor well, which is the very heart of what God commands us to do, and David fulfilled that. As one of the people that received that love, I know just how fortunate I was to have him in my back pocket. Piano emergency? David was just a text away. Broken cast iron piano plate? It wasn't your fault, Nate. Here's some data to show the customer that it wasn't. Hey, Mylan, you want to learn how to level keys? I'll show you how to do it in 1 hour. Jenny, when you come in today, I'm going to show you how to do a pitch raise on an upright. I'm going to tune all 230 strings in 10 minutes. And every day, he would push you and love you, never in arrogance. And that's just who David was. He pressed you to grow in your speed and efficiency, and he also pushed you to be a better human. He pushed you to love your neighbor as yourself. And he knew he was the best when it came to pianos, though he never said it, because he wanted those around him to grow alongside of him, never asking to be the center of attention. He defended those who were trying to provide their best work, myself included. But the one thing he said frequently that helps to unify all of this together was, pianos are what I do. They're not who I am. We love you, Dave, and I hope one day we'll all be able to love like you did.
Hi everyone, my name is Jialin Yao. I'm an artist diploma student here, and I've been knowing Mr. Brown since I came to Texas in 2023, and he has been such a dear friend to me and such a supportive and a man who respect a lot. I remember the first day I came to school, he asked me to play exactly on this piano, and he would sit everywhere to check the sound and ask me for the feedback. So I was deeply touched by his humbleness and inspired by his professionalism. And later on, he helped me and my colleagues from many important competitions. Especially this time, he helped me and my colleagues to get in the Van Cliburn competition, which is gonna happen in next month. So I wanna thanks to him for his kindness and integrity, and I wanna dedicate my performance of Scriabin B minor fantasy to him and to everyone who loved him. Thank you.
soft as I can play. It's about as soft as it will allow me to play. Okay, now we work our way up. No change in color at all. No change in timbre. It's just loud, louder, loudest.
Yeah.
It's like turning up the volume now on your stereo. So we'll check pitch. Which we'll do the old-fashioned way first, just because it's quickest.
Fork in that.
And it's close.
Arrows, sometimes from the strike point on down to the end of the tail. If they aren't tapered very well or tapered evenly, sometimes it can make it seem like it's moving or it's only moving on one side.
So the first thing I do, you notice that I haven't really taken the piano apart. All I've done is just lift the lid. I want to see what it's like, the way it sits, the way that you're playing. Okay, pull it out. You can tell the pedals are noisy. Rattle.
Yeah.
And when I play a few keys, it's very bright. Right? So the piano's going to be hard to play soft, and it's hard to play soft with control.
Yeah.
But notice that it's listening, just like how I described us tuning and listening to the higher partials. That's exactly what this is. It's listening to the 7th partial. It's listening to D sharp 4.
Oh.
7th partial,
Wow.
which is an odd numbered partial.
Yeah.
But if we listen,
There it was.
there it is. Right? So
How are we doing for time, Jenny? Has anybody snored or left at the bar or anything yet?
automatically now it sounds better with the bass.
Totally.
Right?
So I'm down here. My head is straight with this hammer that I'm looking at. I'm watching.
But the thing about Yamahas is they're just, you can't kill them. They're so well put together. And I've got a long-standing relationship with Yamaha corporately.
Really?
And yeah, and locally. Yeah, I'm one of their piano performance teams, so there's 10 of us nationwide
Yeah.
that service their Busendorfers and high-end Yamahas mostly.
Yeah.
So, when Yamaha came into this country in the 60s, it was just a different, they worked with everything back then. Like, there were no foreign cars, there were no foreign pianos.
Weird.
So that's a privilege in this business too, is you get to be, you get to work on people's family pianos.
Right,
Yeah,
sure.
it's just,
Generation.
back to the 19th century in some cases.
Wow.
And so you've got a responsibility to the owners, but then you've also got a responsibility to the makers. That this may be a piano that's not even been disassembled in any meaningful way since it was new. That's the nature of 80% of the pianos you find. Because it's just the nature of the piano.
Okay.
It gets brighter and louder with time as it gets played.
Yeah. To me.
See? Cancel right there.
Nice.
Tonight, I'm always available to anyone who has any questions. Like I say, my way's not the way. There are many, many talented people in the Guild and as technicians throughout the world, and we all have a lot to learn from them, myself included. And so I'm very appreciative that you would come tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Radha Bandrupalli. You don't see my name on the program because I was not scheduled to speak. While we were driving up here, Brittany and my wife Manju, who's sitting here, Brittany said, maybe somebody should speak on my behalf. So if you see me stumbling, that's because I'm not prepared. And I have a good excuse. But I wanted to point out a few things. If you all noticed, in some of the pictures earlier, as the screens were rolling, David had long hair, right? And then suddenly his hair becomes shorter. So I'll tell you why that happened. My wife and I, we run hair salons, bunch of hair salons in the DFW market. And Brittany helps us with our business, a big chunk of it. So one day David came to one of our salons with his long hair, and he met Brittany. And since then, he started coming almost every week to get a haircut. So now you know why his hairstyle changed. Thanks to Brittany, that she impressed David so much, he kept on asking her out. But we have a company policy that team members should not be dating customers. And Brittany, since she's responsible to hold that policy intact, she kept on saying no. Then finally, believe it or not, after 6 months, she agreed. And my wife, Manju, and I, we were wondering, how come our revenues are going up? Because David was getting a haircut every week. That's how David met Brittany. And we're very thankful, even though we don't run a Match.com or anything. But if our business helps people find each other, like David found Brittany and vice versa, we will look the other way. And we did. But another thing I wanted to point out is that, and I share this with my kids, and I tell this to myself all the time, that, life is well lived when you have, and we've all heard this, when you have people to thank for. The other side of this is that life is even better when there are other people who thank you, and they can genuinely thank you, regardless of how big or small thing you do for them. So, Manju and I, we invited David and Brittany once, quite some time back. This was before his health challenges had started. And we cooked some Indian food. And David had that knack, had that capability to thank you that increased the value of what you did for him. The Indian curry, the Indian lentil, that was nothing special we did for David and or Brittany, but it was David's feedback that made it very special. He made our day by thanking us so genuinely, with the twinkle and the smile that Melissa, you just alluded earlier. And that was David's specialty. And a lot of times since then, as his health challenges grew, we would cook for him once in a while, which was not a big deal because we cooked for us anyways, right? But we were selfish enough. If we were feeling down, we would say, let's cook something and call Brittany so that she can take it for David. You know why? Because we would get a thank you note, a thank you text. That would make our day. And that was David. He had that capability to genuinely, as we go through our busy life, a lot of times we forget how to thank each other. David taught us that. Thank you, David. I'm sure most of us sitting in this room, we have a lot to thank David for. His smile, his sense of humor, the twinkle in his eyes, it always made our day. And finally, in the last week or 10 days, my wife Manju and I, we got one last opportunity to cook for him. And that was probably one of his last full meal. But David, you did not thank us for that. I will come and get it when I come and get it. Thank you, David.
Many of you knew David for far longer than I did, or had more opportunities to interact outside of the workplace. Yet I tell you that when we had kindred spirits, I'm thankful for every interaction that we shared. There's an interesting phenomenon that happens in Meadows, or at least in the music division, that nearly every conversation begins with a history lesson. Although David identified this as a problem, he was in fact one of the most guilty culprits. So many of our conversations began with him linking a circumstance or a decision to an event years ago. He would tell these stories with clarity, thoughtfulness, and often side-splitting laughter. I even remarked to him that there must have been a meeting in 2017 where it was approved that all stories would begin with a history lesson. But he always linked to a talented student achievement, a noteworthy accomplishment of current or emeritus faculty, and he did so in a way that he was feeling joy and pride. During my first year, these banterings became so comedic that I started keeping small bottles of water in my refrigerator, of course for all guests, but most specifically for David, who would be laughing so deeply that he needed to clear his system. I'm thankful that I got a chance to know David in these ways. In 2010, when then music division director, now Dean Holland, needed a new piano technician, he ran a national search to hire the premier technician, and David was the choice, being pulled from Arizona State University. His artistry and commitment to the purity of sound was at the highest level. David was a trained technician for Steinway, Yamaha, Bosendorfer. He had received an invitation to participate with a highly select group of technicians studying with the Fazioli Piano Company in Italy right before his health turned a few years ago. We had few conversations on funding that and what an opportunity it was that he had earned. He was unable to participate due to the first cancer episode, but from the moment of his return, we talked about him using that invitation as a guidepost for his strengthening. If there were two things that David cared about at SMU, it was piano and students. He took such pride in preparing the instruments that our students would have impeccable competition, audition recordings, and exquisite recitals. When word would come back about students placing in Cleveland or Van Cliburn competitions, an incredible piano accomplishment anywhere, David would radiate with joy that he, in a meaningful way, contributed to the achievement and, more importantly, helped a student reach their goals. Similarly, he worried greatly about student recitals and their presentation. Anytime someone hinted that one of these was of lesser importance than something else, David was the first to describe how these are singular moments in a student musician's trajectory and important moments not only for them, but their families and teachers. He protected recitals like a hawk because of his commitment to student success. David occupied a unique position in music higher education in that eventually he shared responsibilities as piano technician and director of operations, two polar opposite skill sets that do not typically exist within one person. David's mind and methods were sharp as a tack. Of course, procedurally, he would require that all events be submitted by email, but it was amazing to collaborate with David in planning sessions, the way he could keep track of so many significant and disparate events that may not have been finalized. Regularly, he would caution me against something because of his awareness of another important event that someone had hypothesized to them. His meticulousness and his insistence were central to the production success of the music division. David repeatedly presented me with two guiding axioms that I share now. First, no matter what the request or event, David always asked three words: mission and purpose. If the idea aligned with mission and purpose, he worked tirelessly to support it. If it was out of alignment, he would press back until he understood. Colleagues, know that this barometer of mission and purpose was driven home to me by David, and it is how I ground all of my decisions as the director of the division. Second, David had a spectrum of responses for event feasibility. It ranged from yes through no to the six-letter word hell no. to the furthest extreme of not just no, but hell no. When he would drop that phrase, I understood how off base he felt an idea was. I'm adopting that scale for the rest of my career in honor of David Brown. If you hear me say, not just no, but hell no, best to assume that you need to reconfigure your approach next time around. I will close with a reminder of David's kind-heartedness, very similar to the words we had just heard, not nearly as well delivered. At the end of every one of our conversations, informal through full staff meeting, David would say to me, "Thank you, Tom. I am grateful for your time." And so, on behalf of all of us, thank you, David. We are grateful for your time. While this is going on, rock music and pop music